No, I cannot.
You sleep enough when you die.
What'll be soon?
On the plane, screaming.
Like a girl.
Oh.
Wi-Fi doesn't work when the nose
God
is down 70
bless it.
degrees. All right.
Cambridge's a bitch. 3, 2. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 207, recorded on June 20th, 2012. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malventano.
And we have what will probably be a somewhat shorter, more concise podcast this week until we start get people actually to discuss things. First off, a couple of bits of news. There may be some people that have heard that PC Perspective, the podcast, like PC Perspective, the Flamethrower, will be leaving the Twit network. And that is true. It will be happening sometime probably in July. They're giving us some time to figure out our own setup and that kind of deal. But not to worry. PC Perspective will still continue to exist. You will still get to listen to Josh and Jeremy and Alan and I kind of banter back and forth. Maybe we'll figure out how to add in a fifth person too on our own. If you want to keep tabs on what we're doing with that and kind of our schedule for all that, just keep checking back at pcper.com /podcast. Or pcper.com/live. /live is where we'll do the live video versions of it, and then /podcast is where you'll be able to find the downloadable audio versions and that kind of stuff, and maybe videos as well. So all of that is kosher. We're all good for all that. And speaking of pcper.com/live, I wanted to make sure we pointed out for those of you who are watching live or download this on Thursday, we have a lot of cool events coming up. By a lot, I mean two. This weekend on Friday, let me check my schedule here, see how I worded it. On Friday, we have a special AMD Radeon Graphics presentation at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Now, I can't be more specific than that, but it is a event. We're going to have a representative from AMD in-house to talk about a new high-end Radeon Graphics card. So if you maybe pay attention to what NVIDIA has done recently, that you'll get an idea of what we're talking about here. It should be really cool. You'll definitely want to make sure you tune in for that live. We're going to give away some prizes, do Q&A and all that kind of stuff as well. And then on Saturday, this is going to be either a triumphant excursion for myself or a huge embarrassment. On Saturday at 2 p.m., at pcper.com/live, I am going to attempt to build a PC blindfolded. And Josh, I'm sorry, I know you sent.
It will be a huge lesson in humility for you, right?
Yeah, but I'm not going to wear those that blindfold with the pink fuzzy stuff on the edges of it. I just didn't feel.
How about your furry handcuffs?
Those I'll wear, and that'll make it even more difficult. It'll be a real Houdiniac than the fur lined handcuffs. So I'm going to try to build a PC blindfolded, and we're going to donate money to charity one way or the other. We have to come up with a time. I don't know how we're going to do it. We have to create a time where it's like if I can build it in under 20 minutes, I take money out of all of your checks to donate to charity. Whereas if I build it in over 20 minutes, it comes out of mine, something like that. So don't say 6 minutes or something like that. That's not fair. We have to come to an agreement of some kind. So that's going to be Saturday at 2 p.m. And Ken will be there in person to see it and stream it. So we'll be doing some interesting things this weekend on the live feed. But enough of that.
Let's get ambiance. You should hire an older woman in like a house coat, smoking a cigarette and coughing every once in a while and yelling, "You suck, Shrout."
Well, we'll just have Ken do that. I'm trying to figure out.
I can see him in a house coat.
Like I'm gonna have like a drink sitting next to me, and I'm wondering like how long it's gonna take for me to like just knock that over, or something like that, like onto the components, and then be totally screwed for the rest of the event. So
blindfolded, handcuffed, and drunk with Ken yelling at you.
Yeah,
starting to sound interesting.
We're gonna have the chat room, right? And I'm gonna have Ken like read the most derogatory comments about me, to me, so he knows, if people are making fun of me, I want to know about it. I want to feel that shame that Josh probably normally feels on a day-to-day basis.
Have you seen my family?
I know, they make fun of you. So let's talk about hardware and stuff that we reviewed and posted as news. Allyn actually took a quick jaunt up to New York City not too long ago. And then when he came home, Western Digital sent him a new product. This is kind of interesting. Western Digital actually entered into the router market, which kind of seems like totally out of left field, but is an interesting, I guess, direction for the company to take. So, Allyn, why don't you tell us a little bit about the MyNet series of routers and the specific model that you actually got to test and review last week?
Sure. Western Digital came out with, it's actually a pretty, I don't want to say it's a huge line. It's actually, I was tempted to make the comment that it's nice that they don't have too many, but I think that over time, they're going to just look like the Linksys and the Ciscos and everybody else if they keep coming out with new lines and new series and whatnot to go faster on the speeds. So it's nice now for the moment that they only have a few models there. So there's let's see, there's 3 different models that are just standard routers. They have USB 2.0, not 3.0, unfortunately. But it is USB 2.0 out the back. Different network throughputs from 300 megabit up to 450 megabit, and then it just scales as you ramp up model numbers. The bottom line has like 4 ports of just fast 100 megabit Ethernet, and then all the models up after that have 4 or in one case 7 ports of gigabit on the back, which is actually pretty beefy for a router, right? For a router, and the router that we reviewed had actually that 450 megabit on 2.4 gigahertz, 450 megabit on 5 gigahertz, 7 gigabit Ethernet ports out the back, 2 USB 2.0. Yes, I know if those looking at the picture, one of them is in fact a blue port. It's not USB 3. I don't know why.
Damn.
It's just not. I guess it's just that was the parts they were getting. I don't know. But pretty solid product. Firmware was the most impressive part of it to me, actually. But as far as OEM firmwares go, I'm one of those guys that doesn't buy a router for himself unless it's compatible with Tomato or DDWRT. And there's a lot of people out there that are the same way, I'm sure. They just want that those firmwares are open source. They've done a lot of, they've been able to figure out a lot of stuff in those communities and make those much more powerful and more feature rich, right? This one, right out the door, I had a hard time fitting all the pictures out, all the screenshots I was taking onto the review, just because there was so much stuff to look at. Like I had to start cropping stuff out and just, okay, I can't cover this. This is going to make it too big, that sort of thing. So really, really, really nice. I mean, it had anything that I could think that I would need for my home for as far as features on a router. I think the only thing that was really missing that I actually put as a con in the review was the there's no watchdog / automatic reset thing in the firmware. I know DDW
Was that just
does this.
to make it more stable? Like you reboot it at 5 in the morning so you know it's going to last through the rest of the day type of thing?
Yes, but that said, I ran on it for 2 weeks and intentionally tried to just do a bunch of stuff on the internet, and I didn't have any issues. So it runs fine for 2 weeks. But the only say it's running for 3 or 4 months. I mean, it doesn't matter how good your firmware is. It's a computer. You run it for several months in a row, right? Eventually, something's going to flake out on the thing, right? It doesn't matter how good you are at programming. It's just things become more unstable over time. So I would have liked to see that where, you don't want something like that happening to you when you're out of town and you're trying to remote into your PC or whatnot. You don't want that to be the time that your router is frozen up. But really cool firmware. You can update the firmware from within the firmware, which I thought was awesome. It's just like, hey, check for new firmware. Oh, there's one available. Here, just hit this button to update, and it just does it, right? Really,
update the firmware of your router over the network
from within.
Yeah, I've done that on D-Links and Netgears and stuff. Yeah. You
just
basically browse to a file and it downloads the file to it, and then it does the update process, I assume.
Yeah. But the fact that you don't have to go digging through their website looking for a model number.
Oh, right.
it's all there. It just like it pulls it off a Western Digital server and just does the update like for you. So you're not even downloading a file. It just does it. The parental control stuff was not complicated, but just like insanely like feature. Holy crap! There's a lot to it. There was like so much granularity there that I couldn't even. You'd have to be like crazy parent to actually use all that stuff. But that's good, right? Because you want to be able to do that. You can whitelist or blacklist websites across the whole router or per device or both. You actually register the different devices with it. It goes through a Western Digital website to do this. And I'm assuming that it sort of pushes that information back down to the router after you've done like reconfigured it. But it's web-based, right? So if you have this link, you should be able to get to that website from outside of your network. Meaning, say, you're the parent, you're out, you're traveling, your kids are at home doing whatever, you just found out that they're getting onto whatever this website is. You just log into that thing and add it to the blacklist, and it's gone, right? So that's pretty cool that you don't have to actually do it through the router, and that way. And I didn't test this yet, but I would think that if it's registered through the website like that, then it might even survive like a reset of the router firmware. Maybe.
Right.
I would see that might be one of the reasons they did that.
Did you test performance and that kind of stuff on this, or how did that side seem?
So performance on the network, it was decent. I think it was maybe a little bit limited by the fact that it was USB 2. But again, it's kind of hard to get from any kind of a lower power router like this. This is not like a Synology NAS box, right? It's not meant to be that sort of a thing. So any over the internet connected to over your network connected to a USB 2 device that's plugged into your router is never going to be like really smoking fast. But that said, I think it was like between 15, 18 meg per second going to a device within the network. That's if you were on, connected via gigabit. And I think that's really just limited by, the CPU of the router can only go so fast to do that stuff.
Okay.
Right. And also, this was a device that was formatted NTFS. So you have, there's all kinds of overhead associated with trying to read or write to an NTFS device connected over USB. So still, pretty good. Gets the job done, right? It's
sure.
18 meg per second is enough to stream most media over your network just fine. So
what's the price on this model?
Actually, I don't think I have
Is
that
it for
handy.
sale yet?
Yeah, they're starting to sell them just now. We will have to check the Newegg.
Yeah, let's get the most up to date. Is it the MyNet 900?
Yeah, MyNet N900. Probably just get away with typing in 900.
With 1 terabyte of storage, $249.
That's actually one model higher.
Above? Okay, that's the N900 HD. There we go. Okay.
So the one that I reviewed is 179.
Okay.
Now there's a little bit of a caveat here. When you move to the N900, what they call the N900 Central, which I'm not seeing in the listing on Newegg there.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of weird. You actually get dropped back down to 4 ports of gigabit from 7. So consider that.
Okay.
If you want I guess they're probably figuring there that if you're the type of person that wants to get the router with the hard drive integrated so you can back up to your network over that, you're probably not so much of a power user, that you need 7 gigabit Ethernet ports. You're probably okay with 4, which makes sense, right? Because if you're that kind of person,
yeah,
you're just going to get the 7-port model and you're going to have your own storage somewhere.
No, I don't think I've ever even had a router that has more than 4 Ethernet ports on it. I'm just so used to like having to buy a switch, like to add on to it or whatever, like a gigabit switch and that kind of stuff.
And I think that's the perfect sweet spot that they needed to get over. That little 4, because my router that I normally use only has 4 ports on it as well, and I have stuff that I haven't plugged into it.
But I've got my stuff in 2 rooms, and so I just uplink the switch to that, so I don't have to run 4 more cables into where my router's at?
Yeah, if you're trying to spread stuff out, yeah.
Sorry.
True. And actually, along those lines, and I haven't seen it. I don't know if this one's listed on Newegg either, but they're also coming out with a switch that's the same form factor. That's an 8-port gigabit switch.
Oh, just like a matching form factor switch?
Yeah, which is also handy because some people prefer that too, right? Like if they want to have their little network stack of stuff, they want it to at least, be able to stack on top of each other, not be like some big box and a little box, right?
Yeah, I want to look important and functional.
Sure.
2 things that I've never been able to pull off.
Yeah, you just want to lie to people.
Not in any of our offices. Right.
Well, then there's Ryan's solution.
Okay, so the most impressive part of this whole line, the most impressive part of this whole line of routers is that, and their one feature that they have exclusivity on that they made in-house was this thing called Fast Track, with 1 T. It's like a weird word. Anyway, it's a form of quality of service that's not really quality of service. It's like quality of service is really just packet-based. It's like, okay, what packets, what port, what is this on? And it just tries to figure out, okay, what kind of traffic is this? And it just tries to give priority to those things.
Right.
Fast Track is it's more stream aware. It's more looking at the whole big picture. And it also takes action way faster than QoS is able to do. And that's because what the Fast Track stuff does is it has some intelligence to it. You can actually go in and manually tweak this as well. But it tries to figure out what your max upstream and downstream is for your internet connection. Once it's figured that out, it actually, most of the time it'll keep, if you have 1, 2 things, whatever is going on, and you're just not saturating your connection yet, it'll just let all that stuff fly, right? However, as soon as you have something that saturates your link, something that, say you're downloading something and it's actually pegging your downstream, if there's other stuff going on, and that other stuff happens to be any kind of media streaming or Skype or anything where, the quality of that stream would drop with it having to share with a much faster download in parallel, it immediately throttles back the download. And so basically it makes sure that anything that's a stream, the exact, gets the full bandwidth available to it. Right. So it's more like a, stream shaping, if you will. But here's the thing, it works really well. Last podcast, I spent the whole podcast in the background downloading huge stuff and uploading huge stuff. And I stayed HD widescreen the whole time. Didn't drop down once. Like I was trying to break this thing. And, just...
Dude, you are huge stuff.
Yeah, well, Man, I had there was a Netflix stream going to the TV over Wi-Fi at the same time. Just for, So I did the opposite of what I normally do for a podcast for us.
Right.
Usually I go through and I make sure that there's nothing going on the computers and nothing's, no big downloads are happening, nothing else. I have to go and do this little mini checklist so that we get a good quality podcast. So this is
it's still us, but you mean like audio
us.
quality.
So the audio and the video is nice.
Right. All right, so that actually sounds pretty interesting. I'm eager to try it out here because I've got a lot of routers that I have fallen behind on in terms of testing from Asus and Apple as well. So check out that review at the website. I also wanted to mention, although he's not on the podcast, Matt did a really, really good article looking at low-end laptop graphics solutions, and he compares 5 different options from Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA. Talk about the Intel HD 4000 graphics on the Core i7s, the HD 4000 graphics on the ultra low voltage processors because they perform very differently. GT 650 and the GT 630, I believe. Let me go double check. It might be the 640 and the 630. So those are the Kepler based, 640M and 630M. Those are NVIDIA GeForce Kepler-based discrete solutions, and then the AMD Trinity APU with the HD 7660 graphics integrated in it. And so he looks at performance in some games like Civ 5, Diablo 3, Skyrim, Dawn of War 2, those types of things. But he also looks at how the drivers work for each one. He kind of goes through the driver control panels of Intel and NVIDIA and AMD and kind of gives you an idea of whose looks the best, whose performs the best, whose is the easiest to get to the options you want. and it's kind of surprising. So like the AMD one looks the best, but it's really hard to find the stuff that you want. The NVIDIA one is the worst looking. It looks like it was built in Windows XP timeframe, but it has all the options you want. And Intel's the easiest to use for a beginner, as you would kind of expect. You know, it goes over switchable graphics solutions for both vendors and multi-monitor support. You know, what kind of features these low-end options offer. And, you know, his kind of conclusion that he comes away with is, despite the fact that a lot of people don't believe that discrete graphics are important, he says that it is important, and that NVIDIA has like the best option there. They are performing great, and they have Optimus technology, which does a really good job of being able to switch between integrated and discrete without, you know, bothering the user, without bugging them with requests for information and that kind of deal. It's actually really, really nice. And so if you look on the page that shows the performance conclusion, it's kind of interesting. It gives you just a relative performance metric based on the Intel HD 4000, which is the Ivy Bridge integrated graphics, right? So this is the top of the line graphics from Intel on their latest processors. And Trinity is about 32% faster. The NVIDIA 630M is 64% faster. And then the 640M is 112% faster than it, and you know, you get some interesting metrics. It's a really, really good article if you're looking at a couple different laptop options. If you were debating whether or not you would actually need a discrete graphics in your Ultrabook or your laptop or whatever it is you're looking to buy, you definitely want to go check out this article that Matt wrote up. It's well done, and I think comes to some interesting conclusions. Some conclusions that are not so interesting came about with my review I just posted today, of the Galaxy GeForce GT 640. So this is a new GPU from NVIDIA, kind of new. This is GK107. This is Kepler for the low end of discrete graphics, right? So the GT 640. And I don't know what your guys' kind of recent thoughts and opinions are on kind of like that GT line of products from NVIDIA. Even if you look back at the 200s and the 400s and the 500s, I don't think any of us have had real like high expectations for those cards. They've always just seemed to be not good values, not good performers compared to the competition, that kind of thing. So I was eager to see if GK107, because it is based on Kepler, was going to change everything. But so GK107 is only 384 CUDA cores compared to the GTX 680, the high-end part, it's 1,536. So you see we've got a dramatic drop in the amount of cores. We're talking about 128-bit memory bus, 1 gig of memory, 32 texture units, 16 ROPs. And both the core and the memory run at 900 megahertz. So specs wise, you know, kind of comes in where we would kind of expect it to be. 1.3 billion transistor chip, TDP of 65 watts at its maximum level. The card itself from Galaxy, this is just the card that we happen to get in, is actually pretty cool. It has this, if you look on the second page, it has this pretty cool, like, they call it the cleaning mode, but really the fan housing kind of comes up. The shroud that covers the fan blades and the heatsink just like completely tilts up, and you can access the heatsink to clean it or whatever you want to do there, which is pretty nice. The problem comes with the benchmarks, actually. So if you look at any of the pages of benchmarks, you'll find that what we compared this card to is the Radeon HD 7750, the Radeon HD 6770, and NVIDIA's last generation GTS 450. Now, these are all either $99 or $109 video cards. So they're right at that $100 price point, right? What you'll find is as you look at these benchmarks, you know, take a look at Battlefield 3, for example, right? That's the first performance metric that we show you. And at 1680 by 1050, the 7750 gets 48 frames per second, and the GT 640 gets 35 frames per second. We're talking about a difference of 35%, right, at the lower end of the spectrum, 1680 by 1050, and that kind of continues throughout the rest of the review. The AMD Radeon 7750 that is about $10 more expensive than the GT 640, which I'll admit is a decent amount. Like it's a significant. It's 10%. Right, of the total cost of these cards, which means a lot maybe to the consumers buying in that price range and to OEMs building in that price range. You're talking about performance differences that are very regularly in the 30% range and sometimes as high as like 50%. That's like not even close. It's not even remotely in the same area in a lot of cases. I think Metro 2033 was probably the worst. 17 versus 26. That's a lot. That's more than 50%. Which it's interesting. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or theories on why NVIDIA's like super low end cards can seem to have been like this for the last couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years, where this
I don't know
GT
about
lineup
that, because the GT 450 was, I thought it was an underrated card.
That was the GTS 450.
Yeah, the GTS 450.
Yeah, that one's fine. And if you look at it, it's in these comparisons because you can get it for $99 now, and it is much faster than GT 640 as well. There's something about this GT branding that NVIDIA has had on their GPUs where, like, I think it's just that they do such a good job marketing and promoting their high-end brands, the GTX line, GeForce products, that they just assume that cachet, that mind share will carry over. And so people see, oh, there's an NVIDIA card for $80 and an AMD card for $80. We're just going to buy the NVIDIA card because I know that the GTX 680 is an awesome product. So this one's going to be awesome at this price range as well. And I feel like they're, attempting to kind of pull one over on the consumer, I guess, in that way. Because if you look at like the GT 240 when it came out, and the GT 420 when it came out, and the 440 and those things that this is supposed to replace, they just were never really competitive with the AMD options. But they didn't seem to care. Like on the high end, they would care. They would market about it. They would adjust prices. They would adjust packages. They would do things like that. And NVIDIA never seems to really mind if they happen to fall behind in performance here.
Yeah, it could just very well be that they're making a decent little bit amount of margin on these products, and they figure that the people who are willing to spend the $100 or less are not going to be going at it with a microscope or magnifying glass like the people who are going to spend $250 or $450, who are the enthusiasts who go onto websites and forums and scream and yell at the top of their lungs about, 5% performance difference, but you've got 7% difference in price of the card.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think that they're certainly appealing to a different market who is not as savvy as the people who, really take these things to heart and do weeks and weeks of research. It's more like, oh, hey, that's an NVIDIA something. It's got to be good.
It's got a high number on it.
Yeah, it's like it's a GeForce 4 MX. It's gonna rock.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought. And somebody in the chat room mentioned that remember they used to come up like the 2 gigabyte, or maybe they had like 3 or 4 gigabyte versions of these GT graphics cards, just because like this one's using DDR3 memory, so the memory for this is dirt cheap compared to what they're using on the high end cards. So they could easily bring this to a higher frame buffer count, and it really doesn't do any good at this low end of performance metric. It's really disappointing, and you're exactly right. Like the person who's buying the sub $100 card isn't probably going to do a whole lot of research, and I think that NVIDIA is kind of taking advantage of that. Whereas if somebody who's going to buy a $100 card were to read this review, they would easily see that the 7750 is a better solution for gaming at this price point. So, if people aren't reading that, we hope that people that are friends with those people are reading these articles. They find out that, okay, the 7750 is the best card at around $100, that they will make that recommendation to their friends and whatnot when they do ask. So we'll see. I kind of say in the end of the article that if NVIDIA were to sell this for $70 instead of $100, that it's a much more compelling product. Because AMD doesn't really have anything. Once you get below the 7750, AMD doesn't really have a lot of options there that are very compelling. And when you start talking about, a 30% price gap or 25% price gap, then you start being able to justify some of the performance differences there. Yeah. So if you're interested in that and you want to have the right information for when your low cost budget gaming friends and family will ask about it, then check out that review. We will take a quick second here to stop for an ad break, and then we'll be right back to discuss a handful of news items. All right, and thank you for that. So I was actually not on the podcast last week when we had the AFDS discussions, right? And I don't know. I don't think much came out of Thursdays. So Thursday was the last day of the show. They had a little keynote on there. They had Phil Pokorny, no, Chief CTO at Penguin Computing, Amir Awadallah, CTO at Cloudera, and then Mark Papermaster from AMD, who's the vice president and CTO at AMD. So, the Penguin Computing guy talked about just how server resources have changed. The Cloudera guy talked about the same type of stuff. It was all fairly interesting. If you wanted to learn about Hadoop and distributed Apache computing and that kind of stuff. Interesting from an intellectual point of view, not necessarily from a hardware point of view quite yet. So the one interesting announcement that they had in this, if you kind of scroll all the way towards the bottom of our live blog, you'll see where is it? What is that? C Micro. There we go. So they built a C Micro module based on Opteron, and C Micro is this super condensed server architecture that AMD acquired like 10 weeks ago or something is all. So they were showing off the very first Opteron-based C Micro solution, and they're now with this kind of module, they're able to get 512 processing cores, x86 cores, in a 10U system. So I mean that's pretty impressive density that they're talking about there, and I think AMD, even in the server market, needs some of that kind of excitement to kind of drum up interest in their products line there. I don't know. Did we leave anything off from AFDS that anybody wanted to touch on, or we pretty much summed it up last week?
Yeah, that Opteron module from C Micro. Apparently, it's a quad memory channel, unreleased Opteron. And it's something like 8 cores, 16 threads, I think. But anyway, it's for how dense those servers are. I mean, I'd be very curious to see what speed these things are running at. I would say more, but I can only just say because there's just not enough information out there. But
fair enough.
It is interesting to see that they're moving that direction. I was very surprised to not see any kind of mention of a Trinity-based APU in those type of modules. But
yeah, there definitely wasn't anything in C Micro. They did mention several times throughout the week using APUs in the server environment, but they didn't really get into specifics. I think it was Cloudera or Penguin. I think it was Penguin Computing that talked about building a kind of custom APU server farm out of Llano APUs a while ago, right? Just a custom solution they kind of built. And I think you'll see APUs pretty much ubiquitous in AMD's product line in the not too distant future, including servers. Jeremy, do you want to tell us a little bit about your news post here about Western Digital and Seagate being doomed to be marked as bad sectors, which I'm assuming is some kind of analogy towards something?
No, couldn't be at all. No. This sort of started because one of the big things that has happened recently that a lot of people haven't noticed is Western Digital and Seagate, essentially the only two providers of platter-based hard drives right now on the planet, have switched to a 1-year warranty. This is something that you can't really do unless you essentially own the industry and no one can really tell you that you're not allowed to. All of a sudden you're looking at what most people think of as fairly cheap long-term storage. Its lifespan, its warranted lifespan, is significantly less than your average SSD. You also run into the strange sort of question as to why it is that when there was a huge supply cut because of the Thai floods, more so for Western Digital than for Seagate, but still for both companies, there was this huge problem where all of a sudden they didn't have very much stock prices had to go up. This is supply and demand. This is a usual thing, but you don't generally tend to see record-breaking profits to the tune of about 15 to 18% higher than this quarter last year when this sort of a situation arises. But yet, that's exactly what we're seeing from Seagate and Western Digital, is both companies have made a huge amount of money. And at the same time that they're saying, we really can't provide hard drives to people. Enterprise was not hit quite as bad as the consumer class, but still, they were both hit. You've got two companies which have absorbed every other hard drive company pretty much on the planet. They've got all of their intellectual property. They are pretty much writing the book, and they're sitting looking at a market where SSDs, as we will mention a little bit further on in the podcast, have come significantly down in price. Mm-hmm. To the point where all of a sudden hard drives are now a questionable purchase. Do I really want to go for this long-term storage on the consumer level that's only warranted for a year? So if it dies, I have to buy a new one. I don't have any sort of money-back guarantee. I don't have anything. Or I could buy this SSD, spend a little bit more money, not a ridiculous amount more money, but a little bit more money, have something incredibly fast that is warranted, that is currently getting firmware updates, and is coming from a very wide selection of manufacturers. Not just two that seem, for whatever reason, to be able to do whatever they feel like, which, as a consumer, boils down to a 1-year warranty and prices which we haven't seen in years.
Interesting. Allyn, do you have any thoughts on that?
Anything that makes solid state cheaper makes me happy.
Okay, all right. I can jive with that, and we will talk about that in our kind of part. Well, at the end of the news section here, kind of about that. You know what? Screw it. We'll just move it up because this kind of comes in conjunction, right, with an odd period, right? All of a sudden, we noticed we started talking back and forth in our internal chat applications that we found a lot of SSDs priced under $1 a gig, and sometimes like in the 70 cents per gig, and not even like super duper sales with $50 mail-in rebates or anything like that. We're talking about like normal prices. If you go to the link that we had in our show notes, in particular, is a Mushkin Kronos 480 gig SSD for $369, right? So I mean that's what is that? Well, I get out the calculator app here. That's 76 cents per gig, right? And we've seen a couple a little bit even lower than that, right? And you don't even have to buy the 480 gig version for that to be the case, right? We've seen some 240 gig versions and maybe even 160 gig version that has similar price per gig levels. And I don't know anything about this drive in particular. It's a SandForce based drive. I don't know if is it a SandForce 2000 based drive, I guess, Allyn?
Yeah, it's SandForce 2. It's the enhanced Kronos. Yeah. I think that has the slightly faster memory to it.
Yeah,
correct,
synchronous.
Allyn?
Yeah, it's synchronous RAM under SandForce 2. But which there's nothing wrong with as long as it has the most recent firmware, which Mushkin does. That was the first thing I checked when we were talking about this on our back channel. But yeah, they came out with that firmware that was supposed to fix the drive dropping out and causing blue screens and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean that's pretty interesting now, because a 480 gig SSD not very long ago was going to cost you $1,000, right? I mean, maybe 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, that was going to be the case, right? I mean, that's a pretty substantial difference, and it doesn't seem like this is like something that's going to cycle back up. Does it? It doesn't feel to me anymore like this is a cycle back up. Like if suddenly all these prices go up again, I will be very surprised, because we're seeing it from OCZ and Mushkin and Patriot, all these other vendors, right? Crucial is seeing the same types of deals and prices on SSDs. It's actually really, really interesting. If you are interested in SSDs, now would be a really, really good time to start looking into that. So we'll update our leaderboards appropriately sometime soon too, Jeremy. Let's see what else.
There's also some other solid state related news that there's news post going up in a second about. Linkamedia, remember those Linkamedia guys we were talking about, which were sort of we didn't know where they came from, and it's like, who are these guys? Turns out they make you know how you get those companies that make this obscure chip that's in some part for a long time?
Sure.
They're kind of like BASF. You know, they make the stuff that's in everything, but that kind of deal. Linkamedia has apparently been making parts that have been shipping in Seagate hard drives for the longest time. Some chip that's in there that has to do with interfacing with the head or something like that in the hard drives. So they've been around for years, actually, since 2004. So they've been around for a while. However, they came out, Computex, they announced that we're making a solid-state drive controller, and on paper it looks great. We haven't seen specs, like actual specs from devices popping up anywhere yet, but Corsair is already making drives, supposedly. They have, Corsair Neutron series has their controller in there. So for Corsair to jumping back someone like that and make a whole product line based on their part, I would imagine that enough testing took place to where for them to sign off on it like that. So it must be pretty decent controller at a minimum, I would imagine. Well, they weren't out for very long until they got scooped up. So, think about it, right? You had OCZ bought ND-Links, right? OCZ was a big memory company before, and then they just sort of changed gears on the fly and said, nope, we're doing solid state, right? LSI bought SandForce. Sort of makes sense. LSI is a big HBA host bus adapter for serial ATA and SCSI devices, and SandForce covers both of those checkboxes, and it's solid state, right? So basically, anytime you see a good solid state drive company coming out at this point, especially for controller maker, they just get scooped up. So in this case,
Hynix doesn't make SSDs though, right?
No, they make RAM.
Right, they make actual ICs.
Yes.
So what's the ploy here? Are they getting out if you buy a Link A Media controller, you have to buy Hynix ICs to go in it?
Well, no, because Hynix also packages flash.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But the same deal, right? Are they going to make you use a particular type of flash than with their controller? It's very odd.
Well, I don't know. Which actually, that was one of the sort of claims to fame of this Linkamedia announcement when it came out, was that it could interface with all like six brands of flash memory, right? So I don't know. I would hope that if you're going to come out with your own controller, I guess if Hynix wanted to make their own line and just call it theirs, then they might just say, okay,
right. That's
sorry,
somebody.
you're not
Night Rider in the chat room is saying that's what he thinks will happen, right? Just like Samsung has the end-to-end solution of everything in the middle as well. They could do that. They could do that here, right? And
Hynix hasn't actually made money in years, so maybe they're just
maybe they're going to try
straws, trying to do something as a life preserver to get them in the black.
It was $248 million, I think, was what they paid. So they got money from something.
248 is not nothing. That's piddly.
Hey, that was the time to buy them, though, before stuff started actually shipping and people actually.
Oh, I mean, you're probably right. Probably right. Yeah. The other big news of this week was Microsoft announcing Surface. This is not a giant tabletop touch device. Instead, this is a tablet touch device. It's an interesting little device. I'm sure if you're in technology, you probably couldn't have gone that day without hearing about it. The Surface tablets are incredibly impressive looking from a design standpoint, both in terms of just how they're built, as well as in the products and specifications they're going to have. They're going to build two versions of it. One is ARM based. It's going to use an NVIDIA Tegra 3 SoC in it. The other one is going to be Atom based, apparently x86 base. So there's going to be two models, and then one will have the ARM model will have a slightly lower resolution screen. It will be available several weeks before the other one. They are Windows 8 based devices, obviously. Well, Windows RT and then Windows 8. Windows RT for the ARM version. They didn't list exact pricing. They didn't list exact availability. I think the most impressive part that people have is, I'm a big fan of the kickstand. As Ken will tell you, I love my phone, my HTC Evo with a kickstand, right? So the fact that the tablet has a kickstand is actually kind of cool. That they're aesthetically, I think, going after the iPad in terms of design and sexiness and that kind of stuff. The keyboard attachments that they've come up with are unique and different. And I think really, I can very much see if the performance of the x86 version of the Microsoft Surface tablet is high enough, if the performance is enough to do what I want to do, to use that instead of a laptop, right? If the keyboard feels fine, as good as some of the people that initially get hands-on think that it is, then I have no problem doing that, as long as they can show me battery life in the 8, 9, 10 hour realm, right? That's all I want to see, and I'll have no problem using it, even if it's a Windows 8 device, and you can use it in a tablet form or you can use it in a laptop form. So the Pro device is what they're calling the Intel-based model. It'll have micro SD card slot, USB 3.0, mini display port output, so you can still hook this up to a full-size monitor if you wanted to do that. And both devices will feature high-speed Wi-Fi with the 2x2 MIMO antennas, right? So what's that? Would that take you up to 300 megabits per second?
Yeah, probably 300 megabits. It depends on what's in it. Yeah, but the theoretical should be 300. I think that keyboard is pretty cool. I'm sorry.
Well, there's two models. There's one that's like a physical keyboard that's a little bit thicker, like it has some kind of key travel, and the other one is like, I don't even know, like touch sensitive. Yeah, but it's not a screen. It's like I don't know how to describe it. I've seen it in person.
Membrane.
So.
It's basically just a multi-touch digitizer without a screen behind it. That's flexible, right? Because the digitizer, like say, somewhere in the screen of an iPad or an iPhone, there's a multi-touch digitizer in there, right? Just
some of the chat room did mention that it is not an Atom-based processor. It's Ivy Bridge Core i5
for the Pro.
For the Pro, right. There's two models. There's an ARM version and an Intel version. I think the Intel version was Atom, but apparently that is incorrect. It's actually Ivy Bridge based, which makes me way happier. Depending on pricing, this creates an interesting partner dichotomy, right? Because Microsoft has only, if you look at the hardware Microsoft has made before, they've made things like this, right? Zune music player. Yeah. They've made things like
mice, keyboards,
right? I held up a Logitech one. Don't pause it and zoom in. It was a Logitech one, and
webcams. They made webcams. They tried,
but they've never really gone. They've never really gone into the PC hardware world. And this is interesting. Right? You look at companies like ASUS that spend a lot of time, a lot of money developing kind of unique, innovative solutions. And I wonder how much they knew about this in advance, how much this affects their upcoming plans. So like if you look at HP and Dell and ASUS, are they really going to want to compete against Microsoft directly? I think Microsoft has to. If you want to go up against what the iPad is and what Apple wants the iPad to become, I think having control over the software and the hardware directly will definitely help that. And I think next week or 2 weeks from now, whenever Google announces their Nexus tablet, you'll see the same thing taking place there as well. So it was a really interesting event. It was kind of a surprise to a lot of people. I knew about the ARM-based one. I didn't know about the Intel-based one. So I'm pretty interested to get some hands-on time with this. And if as long as it doesn't come out at $1,500 or something like that,
about $9.
And I know,
I'm in for that.
I know they didn't put the actual screen resolution on the specs that are on their release on the press release on the website,
HD, didn't they?
Yeah.
Well,
so
so the guy slipped it out during when he said the Pro was full 1080p.
Yeah. The ARM one I haven't heard. The ARM one I'm not sure about.
I think that's going to be like by 768 probably.
Yeah, I mean you've got to accept some limits, but no. Digitimes came out today saying that the Win 8 model, the full Ivy Bridge, is going to be at least $800. They didn't put a maximum on it, but they said at least $800. For the Win RT model, at least $600. So you're looking at almost the price of an Ultrabook. Almost. Sort of the price we were promised an Ultrabook would be at. But at the same time, you got to wonder, is the form factor and just the amount of heat that a processor is going to produce going to limit the amount of power you can have on this thing?
The biggest question is the battery. That's the biggest question on these things. It's got to be, right? Battery life.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think this has to be it has to have battery life kind of on par with what the iPad has in order for it to be the same convenience factor and the same usefulness factor, right? I like I'm saying, I love the fact that I can take my iPad with me if I just need to do really, really basic monitoring or email or that kind of stuff. And it will just work, right? And it will work for a long time. I can take it on a 3-day trip and not really have to worry about bringing my power adapter unless I think I'm going to use it a lot. The same can't be said for any laptop that I've ever had. And if we can get something close to that, that would be amazing. So hopefully we'll see that soon. I would really, really, really like to get some hands-on time with it. There's no Microsoft stores near me in Cincinnati. There is one here in Austin. I don't know when they'll actually have availability of that kind of stuff, though.
I had kind of an interesting observation the other day about the battery on the new iPad and like how long it lasts and whatnot. You know, like solid state, everybody was worried about the drives burning out quickly, and then that just sort of has gone away because the capacities are going up so much, and the person is only reading or writing, so much data, right? So like that, that's remained fixed, but the capacity has gone up, so you're spreading it out over more flash, right? The same exact thing applies to when you have a huge battery in a device like that. A new iPad, it's going to take you an awful long time to go through a full however many cycles that battery is rated for. Mm-hmm. The reason is just because it just goes so much longer than so if you're using it the same as you used the previous one, right? But the battery lasts like almost twice as long. You're not going to hit it with that many charge cycles overall. I mean, mine, I go for like a week without even plugging mine in. So
yeah, I don't use mine really frequently. It's not a directly like a super fair comparison because I use my Lenovo laptop a lot, and I've gone through 2 batteries with it in terms of battery wear, right? Where battery used to last me 6.5 hours, now it's lasting 4 hours, and it's super frustrating at that point. But cool either way. I'm eager to see the Surface. And our last bit of news here is Intel has renamed the chip and the design and the ideas and philosophies that were once known as Larrabee, that were going to revolutionize the world of consumer graphics, as Xeon Phi. They've gone full nerd with this product, into the Greek alphabet. Josh, you wrote this up. Tell us a little bit about maybe what the mindset was behind it. This is their mini integrated core architecture.
If you remember many years ago, many moons, a long time, okay, maybe about 3 or 4, Intel wanted to get into the graphics market, and they had a unique and revolutionary idea that they'd have a fully programmable part with plenty of graphics power and all be powered with x86 cores, many of them all together with these vector units attached to them. It would make programming so much easier. Everything was going to be, sweetness and light.
Sure.
Ambrosia and honey. And then it started coming out that they just couldn't fit enough x86 cores with the vector units in there to be competitive in the consumer market with graphics as compared to what AMD and NVIDIA are able to offer. So they kind of went back to the drawing board. Maybe not so much back to the drawing board, but rather they decided to really focus not on consumers, but at the high end, where these many integrated cores, these many x86 cores on one single die, with the attached vector units to do a lot of floating point work, would be very useful in the HPC type environment, the high performance computing. Now, this is not new territory. NVIDIA has been there with the Tesla cards. AMD has been there with the FirePro, I believe. Mm-hmm. Is it? Or Firestream is their branding for that. And so these are cards that are primarily aimed at doing a lot of single and double precision floating point type work for like the natural gas industry, the gas industry, the protein folding guys. Stuff that...
Fluid dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, stuff that, some will require double precision. A lot of it will just, be perfectly fine with single precision. But these, hugely wide architectures that can spit out these numbers very, very fast are good for them. And so Intel they're coming in there with the Phi and they're kind of bundling these in with the new Xeon E5 processors that they're releasing for the server markets, and they're saying that this is going to lead the way from going to the petaflop generation of clusters to the exaflop or exascale, I believe is what they were calling it. And it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to be able to succeed. They claim that these cards will have a greater than 1 teraflop double precision capacity, which matches what we see currently with at least what's from AMD with their Firestream cards that are based on the 7970 architecture. It's right around 1 teraflop.
That's the same thing that NVIDIA announced on their GF110
exactly.
DP as well. Yeah.
Yes. And,
well, I mean, historically, they have such a long record of success with this technology that I'm sure there's just a shoe-in now.
Oh, obviously, because the one thing that Intel is counting on is name recognition, and also all of these x86 cores that are located on this kind of fabric, this networking fabric that supposedly is to ease data transfer and flow control and all these other type programming things that are well above me and my limited vocabulary and intelligence. But yeah,
both.
It's all based on x86, and so supposedly the idea is that if you can program for these giant clusters using multiple x86 processors, you can do that for one of these cards. And not only that, but each one of these x86 processors has a very powerful vector unit attached to it. So you would only need, some extensions to be able to get all this to work very, very well with any modern programming language like C++, C++. You wouldn't need to go into OpenCL or C++ AMP to be able to access the functionality. But again, Intel has not given us all the information that we probably would like to see how this fits in. But I mean, there are many building blocks around Intel that they're hoping to make this a success. I forget, did they buy out or license out that Cray interconnect technology?
I don't remember.
I can't remember if they licensed it or just plain bought it.
They bought it, and I'm trying to remember what it's called.
Yeah, but anyway, that kind of interconnect technology is good not just for CPUs, but also these, kind of MIC type products that the Xeon Phi is going to be comprised of. So the success for Intel is not guaranteed, mainly because we've got guys like NVIDIA who have had CUDA out for ages. We've got the Kronos group actively pushing OpenCL. AMD and NVIDIA are even though the competitors, they still want this area to succeed because it's going to become their bread and butter. We now have the heterogeneous system architecture group comprised of ARM, TI. These guys are all interested in not letting Intel get a foothold into this, very lucrative market because these are all very high-end products, fat margins, and the halo effect on them is pretty significant. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be very interesting to see if Intel can succeed here and if their architecture can actually have the throughput that they're promising. Now, I think that could actually be a significant problem for them because we don't know a whole lot about this networking fabric in between the multiple chips in the MIC. And we look at like AMD and NVIDIA and how they handle data and flow control and stuff like that. I mean, it seems like their architectures are a little bit better placed, better thought out to be able to handle those kind of workloads very efficiently, while Intel could, they could be entering the race a little bit too late with an architecture that just doesn't have the throughput. So we're going to really have to see.
I had a lot of really good conversations at the AMD Fusion Developer Summit about HSA and like whether or not they see companies like NVIDIA coming in and being a part of it, Intel coming in and being a part of it, and whether or not they're just kind of saying what they have to say, but they, they welcome those companies. They expect those companies to be a part of it eventually. Because the whole idea is to create this kind of virtual ISA, right? That then the whole goal is to make it easy for programmers. It doesn't matter what the hardware is underneath, right? That's kind of like the goal of OpenCL, but make it a more fundamental change, make a virtual ISA that these guys have to go to. It was funny, we're looking back at the history of this technology that Intel's been developing really since like 2000. Well, it's been publicly developing since like 2007, I guess, 2008. And I looked back and Daniel Pohl, who's one of the guys at Intel now in their kind of research department, he kind of works in this field very directly in the MIC group and does a lot of work on ray tracing. And he was writing articles on PC Perspective as far back as 2006. Right? In 2006, he had an article on when he built Quake 4 ray traced project on ray tracing and gaming and that kind of stuff. And then he wrote another one a year later. I think it was in January of 2008, seeing how things had progressed in that world. And I think many people, including myself, really thought that ray tracing and this type of architecture would be further along than it is. They've still, every year at IDF, I meet with Daniel and see a bunch of these guys, and things are still impressive. But, we don't have anything that looks like Crysis does or anything like that. We don't have anything that's super close to being ready for mainstream use, but in the server market, it makes a lot of sense. And if they can sell enough of these cards and bring in some money and continue R&D and not just totally kill the project like we kind of all thought was going to happen when they announced Larrabee's demise, then I think that's good. So there you go. That's the news for this week. Before we round out the show, we will do hardware and software picks of the week. Mine is kind of a cheat again because it's a product that I haven't actually finished the write-up on and review of. This is the Pegasus R4. This is a Thunderbolt-based external RAID system. You can buy it. I think like its only place, one of the few places it's actually being sold right now is at the Apple Store, either in-store or online. And it's $1,100, $750. It's a steep price item, but it's more of an enterprise level device. It connects through Thunderbolt. I've got one sitting behind me currently trying to create a RAID 5 array for me, taking its sweet time, but it is doing it over a single. So this one got shipped to me in a RAID 0 configuration, which doesn't make a lot of sense. You wouldn't actually buy one of these and use it as a RAID 0 array, right? That kind of defeats the purpose of having these external RAID systems. It was getting, what did I say, like 650 megabytes per second, 660 megabytes per second, all going over the Thunderbolt connection. We did testing with two of them. Yeah, we did exactly. Death Wish RAID on your external unit is an awesome idea. And we daisy chained two of these together, and we were able to, I think we got like 920, 930 megabytes per second, which is we're pretty much peaking out the potential for this controller on these implementations on these motherboards. We're using the Asus P8Z77V premium motherboard for this testing that has the onboard Thunderbolt controller. We tested an Apple Thunderbolt display pass through. We tested a regular DisplayPort display pass through, and that all kind of worked. These. Basically, I was kind of planning to be underwhelmed by Thunderbolt, but I've been fairly impressed with the speed of it. And once we had the right driver, plug-and-play compatibility works just like USB. The problem is USB 3.0 is still more widely available. And for most people, like it's going to be really, what's USB 3.0? 4.8 gigabits per second? Is that right?
I think you're correct.
Yeah, and then this is 10 gigabits per second. So you have double the available bandwidth, but it's only really useful if you're doing something super hardcore, like two of these RAID arrays, or you have one of these RAID arrays with SSDs in it instead of standard hard drives. Otherwise, it's really hard for an external drive to max out the speed of USB 3.0 even. So I think Thunderbolt will become a much more mainstream product eventually, but right now it's really aimed at the prosumer and a professional level user, just both based on cost and based on the products that are available. So, but so far I've been pretty impressed with this solution as a whole. So that's my pick. If you happen to want to get into the world of Thunderbolt on the PC.
What's that company, Red, in Hollywood that does the 4K to 8K?
Yeah, it's Red
stuff. Red. You would think that Apple would be all over them to try to implement something. Instead, Red goes to HP to create their new workstations. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I saw that news post where they. I mean, you could technically use Thunderbolt on it. I mean, that'll work.
Sure, why not?
I
mean, it's totally a segue. And
like
Mac is being held back on the workstation hardware. But boy, you'd think that Apple would really be trying to hammer that and saying, "Hey, look at us." No,
I think they're realizing the consumer is where they have become the most valuable company in the history of the world, the most profitable company, right? So, who wants to sell 10 workstations when you can sell 10 million iPads? Think about it. Anyway, moving on. Who's next on our list here? Jeremy?
Well, I've changed my mind. I've got an anti-pick this week. All this talk about Surface, it's a nice little touchpad thing. This is not what I was promised. What I was promised was Star Wars Fleet Commander, where you are playing a giant touchscreen and moving ships around. Bert, there's video. Or not. But this was what Surface was sold to me as. This is what I was told Surface was going to be. Not a wannabe Ultrabook. This is brilliant. They also talked about setting up role-playing games where you, again, would be doing it, except this was the Surface table as opposed to the Surface wall. Be able to do entire maps, games, using Surface. And it was brilliant. It was lovely. And this is what I get. I don't get Surfacescapes. I get a wannabe Ultrabook. I don't know. I'm just a little bit disappointed as to what I was led to believe would be reality.
I agree, but having heard, what was the guy's name? He was from the Microsoft R&D department. He came to AFDS and did a talk there as well. And his keynote was incredibly impressive in how the new technologies they envisioned for interaction with computers and that kind of stuff. I think they're working on the stuff that uses. The coolest thing that they showed was the ability to build a camera into a display, so that like behind every pixel were pixels of a photoreceptor for a camera. So like you don't have you could get really close to a screen without touching it, and you don't have to worry about having cameras pointing at it necessarily. The cameras are literally behind the screen. There's they have some really impressive stuff that they're working on there, as part of the team that created Kinect.
It still exists. It didn't go anywhere. It's just called Pixel Sense.
Yeah.
They renamed it.
It's not Surface.
Just the wide scale stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm disappointed.
Who's next? Who's up on the list? Josh, what do you got?
That would be me. Speaking of availability of video cards, isn't it interesting that once the GTX 680s finally became available en masse, we have finally seen the massive price drop that we were expecting of the Radeon HD 7970 series. So finally, Asus has one of their stock-based ones for, it's got the massive cooler for $469. You can get some of the reference designs for, I believe, $449. So yeah, these are still good cards. Plus, you get 3 games. They're good cards. Works nice. It seems like AMD has finally improved the drivers to a point where the bugs don't really bother you too terribly much.
Yeah, you can buy 7970s for as low as like $449 now, like the base models. It's pretty. It becomes a much more likable product now that it's $50 less than the GTX 680. So
correct.
Yeah. Last but not least, Allyn, you're up. Maybe
all
least.
Right, so I've been toying around with something past few weeks. Jawbone. I've always had like some form of a Jawbone at some point. Ryan, I think you found one on the floor at some point somewhere, didn't you?
Yeah.
Do they come in sizes big enough for you?
I was in Anaheim.
They're like all over the place. You can find them on the ground. They're ubiquitous. Anyway, so there's this Jawbone Icon HD. Okay, so it's like a little bit wider version of standard Jawbone that you might have seen. Works the same way. All of it's pretty much the same kind of deal, except it connects as a. It does the A2DP Bluetooth stuff as well, so you can stream music from your phone to it, in addition to just the standard Bluetooth phone call stuff. Right, so that part's kind of cool. The cooler part is that they make one that's bundled with this thing called the Nerd. So this thing's tiny. It's like one of those little Bluetooth dongle things. But you plug it into your system, whatever system you plug it into, doesn't matter. This thing remains paired with the Jawbone, and you don't have to repair it if you, say, plug it from one computer to another. The cool thing is it just shows up as an audio device to the PC that's automatically synced with the Jawbone. So you plug it in and it just, auto mounts in Windows or OS 10 or whatnot, and your audio just goes to that thing instead of, where it was going before. And so, you're in a room, you want to watch a video on your PC, you have other people in the room you don't want to disturb for some reason, you just plug that into the PC, now your audio is piped to your Jawbone. And then while that's going on, say you get a call, well, the Jawbone is still paired to your phone at the same time. It can remain paired to like 8 Bluetooth devices simultaneously. And the way it figures out what to, I guess, pipe to you is whichever one most recently started doing something, right? So if you're listening to a video on the PC and then the phone rings, you can answer the call on that, and it just sort of automatically, ignores the PC stuff until you're done with the phone, and then the PC stuff comes back up. So pretty cool. The only real downside I could see to it was that there's a delay, right? Just like many Bluetooth audio things, with the exception recently being Ryan's awesome Bluetooth headset that he's been playing around with lately.
Are you talking about the Vengeance set?
Yeah, that Vengeance, that one you were using?
It's not Bluetooth. It's 2.4 gigahertz.
Oh, that's
RF.
why.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're passing audio over Bluetooth like this, there's usually a delay. And it's about a quarter to a half a second, which maybe sometimes even a little longer than a half a second, which is really annoying if you're watching video and you're trying to use that as your because there's, it's obvious desync on the video. Like their lips are leading the words by, like a half a second. That just gets.
So it's kind of like talking to you in real life.
Yeah, basically.
Your lips are moving far faster than the sound coming out of your mouth.
Yes, that's what happens. It's sort of like a Japanese.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
It's the worst.
Anyway, pretty cool. It's a little pricey though. It's $140 for the pair of them together. Yeah. But the battery life is pretty darn good on it. I think it's better. I think there's a bigger battery in this than there was in the regular, like the previous generation, the thinner form factor Jawbone that I used to use all the time. I've noticed that this one fits a little bit better. At least I guess that's particular to me. They sort of curved it around to that part that's supposed to sit on your jaw. That the curve is a little sharper, like it juts out a little further, so it's easier for it to sit naturally on, at least on my head. I don't know. They must have had some feedback from some other people too, saying that the previous one it would just sort of like drift away from your jaw over time. This one
doesn't work. That's no good.
Yeah, and then doesn't pick up your voice because it thinks you're not talking. That's bad.
Kind of defeats the purpose. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So there you go.
Cool little device. Worth checking out.
Cool. All right. That is going to round out the show for this week, ladies and gentlemen, I guess. You can still contact us, podcast@pcper.com. We still have that phone number if you can remember it, 1-888-38-PCPer. We've gotten a couple of voicemails in. Once we start doing this stuff ourselves, we might be able to more easily kind of integrate all that kind of on the fly because I never remember to do it beforehand. So again, just a quick reminder, pcper.com/podcast, pcper.com/live. If you want to keep track of all the ins and outs of what's going on with us and the podcast and all that kind of deal. And don't forget, later this week, we have some cool events. Tomorrow, you can catch me on This Week in Computer Hardware on the This Week in Tech Network. And then Friday, we are going to have a special AMD Radeon graphics presentation event Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific, so pcper.com/live for that. And then the same URL will take you on Saturday to watch me attempt to build a PC completely blindfolded So we'll see how that works out. I've had some questions. No, I'm not going to make myself install the operating system blindfolded because that would be really difficult.
And take a long time.
Well, yeah, I don't even. I mean, like that's.
Do you know
that's
Braille?
not
Do you have
fair.
a touch sense pad that you could use?
Nope, I don't have any of that.
No.
So yeah, we're gonna. And I was also originally going to build this in like this really small micro ATX, mini ITX case. And the more and more I looked at it, I was like, there's no way I'll be able to do that. So we're going to do it in a full size ATX case too. But again, Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. You can watch the hilarity ensue. And we may even try to get like Josh and those guys online to make fun of me while I do it as well. That could be fun. Add a little
I'm going to be in Denver.
You don't have the internet in Denver?
Not at Elitch's.
This is my sad face.
That's your Robert De Niro face. Just shooting Ryan throughout, just shooting aspirin.
Yeah, it's the worst. Well, we'll see who else wants to be around. Maybe Jeremy and Allyn love me, but Josh can go off to Denver, I guess. So that's good. That's it. We will round out the show. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for hanging out in the chat rooms. Really love having you guys be a part of the show, and we will continue to do it into perpetuity. No, wait, that's not the right word. Perpetuity.
Perpetuity.
It's a combination of those two.
Perpetuity.
We're going to do it until one of us dies, I guess is what I'm saying.
On air.
And then we'll keep doing it.
That may not be very far away from me.
Well, then we'll cancel the show and we'll start a new one. I don't know what it'll be.
All right.
So thanks everybody. We'll see you next week. I'm Ryan Schraut.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Allyn Malventano.
Bye.